The rest of the news. With the rise of the anti-government philosophy of the Tea Party and the emergence of powerful billionaires like the Koch brothers who do everything they can to destroy regulations, particularly on their own businesses, libertarian has become a buzzword of sorts on the right. But how much do all these self-described libertarians actually know about real libertarianism? The other day I had former Congressman from Texas, Ron Paul, on this program, and we got into an interesting conversation about how a libertarian society would keep corporations, particularly polluting corporations, in check. That conversation started with Congressman Paul describing how pollution is just a simple violation of property rights, the foundation of a libertarian society.
The system that you defined, I don't know of anything perfect, but I think what we have today, when you can buy carbon credits and buy them and allow people to pollute, a strict property rights program would prevent that from happening. You can't do that. You have no right to pollute. It's a property right. Most people can understand it if you're talking about your next door neighbor. Everybody knows he can't come and just dump his garbage in your yard. That would quit.
Congressman Paul then explained how a libertarian society would use the courts to protect those property rights, or your property rights, from having a corporation pollute your air. How do you enforce that right of my right to the property of my own body not being damaged by others putting their externalities into the environment?
You set certain standards, by previous cases. If a person is held responsible, then the next go around, they're going to have to pay attention to this. But
what Congressman Paul means is that for a libertarian society to work, and it's never really been tried, the legal penalties for violating property rights must be so strong that the threat of a lawsuit scares corporations away from screwing over everyday people or polluting. But most modern-day quote-unquote libertarians are so obsessed with destroying the power of government, they forget that a totally deregulated society requires a very strong court system so that individuals can regulate each other. Most so-called libertarians are just corporatists. They want the take of libertarianism, the deregulation, without any of the give, a court system that actually gives everyday people the power to keep corporations in check. What's with that? I'm joined now by Austin Petersen, or is it Richie Rich? Chief Executive at Stonegate LLC and editor of the libertarianrepublic.com.
Yes. All right, well, where do we begin, Tom?
All right. Well, here's where we begin, this foolish crusade for tort reform. All this stuff about, oh, we've got, in Texas, for example, the libertarians there said, the life of a human being is $250,000, period. You can't sue for anything more than that. Right. And this is actually the antithesis of a libertarian perspective.
That's right. That is the antithesis of a libertarian perspective, because to say that you could not sue for more than $250,000 would be a violation of property rights if your life is worth more than $250,000. In your intro, you said that some libertarians are corporatists, but I would say that no libertarian is truly corporatist, because to be corporatist would be to say that you believe that corporations deserve special benefits handed to them by the corporations. And what Dr. Ron Paul, I think, was trying to explain in that thought that you had in the intro was that if you have a system of strict private property rights, then corporations would not be able to get out of limited liability. They would be required to pay the full extent of the recompensation due to anyone whose private property they harm.
I don't disagree. And in a perfect world, that would be marvelous. And it would require courts. So how does this work?
Sure.
So the Koch brothers are up the road, and they're running a paper mill, and it's putting pollution into my water, and they're running one of their oil refineries, and it's putting pollution into my air.
Right.
And I know that I'm getting sick, and my kids have got cancer, but I can't quite quantify it. How do I go to the court and get them to stop?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, before we ever had enormous environmental regulations coming into play, like starting in the 1860s when we were really industrializing, we had a nascent system of forensic analysis that started to spring up in the 1830s in the United States. And what would happen is when they were building railroads, if someone started a fire in a farmer's land, that farmer would then go to the courts, and they would sue for that, and the court would have to decide. I mean, property evaluation is always subjective. Value is always subjective. So a court will have to decide exactly what kind of recompensation would occur, but nobody has the right to pollute anyone else's private property and get away with it. I'm not sure exactly how a court might subjectively value a property, but I think that locally...
But back to the question, how do you make this work in today's society?
Well, I think you would have to start going from a reverse waterfall effect where regulations would occur for the most part on the local level. I think if the federal government...
We're going to have to reverse a lot more than that. I mean, starting, for example, with corporate personhood, the idea that corporations should have rights under the Constitution. Here's what Ron Paul had to say about that.
Okay.
Well, I think only individuals have rights. You and I have rights. The individual, I emphasize the individual, not the unit, the group, or a group of people. No, I don't.
Last time we talked, you argued that corporations should have rights. This is the opposite of what Ron Paul says a libertarian should believe.
Well, I think he's speaking about this in terms of collectivism versus individualism.
No, we were talking specifically about corporations.
Yes, well, I do think that the way that law is structured, it's not technically libertarian. However, I do think what the issue here is how you would regulate corporations. And if we're just discussing generally how we would regulate corporations, we have to talk about something called prior restraint.
Well, no, essentially what he's saying is you don't regulate corporations at all. You hold the individuals in them responsible.
My question to you is, Thom, exactly how much prior restraint do we want to place on entrepreneurs before they can go into the marketplace and take risks so that they can expand the economy? Yes, because it is. Because how you regulate a corporation is when you say thou shalt not, you're issuing prior restraint.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm trying to understand how this works in your world. It doesn't make any sense. I'm saying that this would be sort of a reverse waterfall where the localities where pollution is being produced. So we start out by saying to the Koch brothers, okay, sorry, you're polluting the entire state of Texas and Louisiana, but we're not going to do anything about that because we don't have federal...
Okay, now here's the difference. Obviously, the Constitution does have the Commerce Clause, and when there is an interstate issue, the federal government may come in to arbitrate.
So we should have the big...
Well, no, what I'm saying is right now that the last person that you really want arbitrating any disputes is the federal government, who is the world's largest polluter in the entire world. They issue more carbon than any other institution.
Go off on the street about that, but that's the...
Yeah, they are the largest polluter in the entire world. 134 billion tons of carbon
certainly
dioxide
the military
a year.
is horrible.
Absolutely. Depleted uranium rounds in Iraq. No, you're asking...
Austin, we're out of time.
Okay.
Austin Petersen, thank you.
Thank you.